Steve and his wife Laura lived in a small house. They had no children and longed for one. Their small house was quiet and empty, without the sound of children's laughter. One day, Steve was sitting by a river near his house, leaning against a tree. A gentle breeze was blowing, and the leaves of the tree were falling on Steve's face. Feeling sad, he thought to himself, if I had a son, I would be watching him jump and play right now. Maybe he would even go into the river and play with the water. When he grew up, I would take him to the farm with me every morning. And if I had a daughter, even better. She would stay at home and help her mother with cooking and housework. As he was talking to himself, he saw a shadow in the water. He looked up and saw a bird with a mouse in its claws. Suddenly, the mouse escaped from the bird's claws and fell into the river. Steve felt sorry for the little mouse. He wanted to pick it up and take it home with him, but he thought to himself, if my wife sees the mouse, she will never let it in the house. Steve sighed and said, what if this little mouse turned into a beautiful girl so that my wife would be happy to see it? At that very moment, Steve's wish was granted, and the little mouse turned into a beautiful little girl. Steve couldn't believe it. He picked up the little girl and ran home with joy. When he got home, he called out to his wife, Laura, where are you? Come see, our wish has come true. Laura came quickly and saw her husband holding a small child in his arms. She was surprised and happy. Oh my God, who is this child? She is so beautiful, she said. Laura had already fallen in love with the child. Steve told Laura the whole story. After hearing the story, Laura told her husband, I will raise her like my own daughter. I will sew her clothes, make her a bed and mattress, and knit her warm clothes. From that day on, their lives were filled with joy. The sound of the child's laughter and crying broke the silence of the house. The child became more and more beautiful every day, so they named her Diana. Laura woke up in the morning with the love of Diana in her heart, and Steve returned home in the evening hoping to see her again. Months and years passed, and Diana grew up. One day, Steve called her and said, Diana, my daughter, it is time for you to choose a husband for yourself. Diana said, I want a husband who is the strongest in the world. Steve thought for a moment and said, he is none other than the sun. If he weren't there, there would be no day or night. Then he got up and left the house. He looked at the sun for a moment and said loudly, Hey sun, my daughter wants a husband who is the strongest in the world. I think you are the strongest. Would you be willing to marry her? The sun said, but I am not the strongest. There are those who are stronger than me in the world. Steve said, who is stronger than you? The sun said, the cloud is stronger than me. It can cover me. Go to the cloud and ask it. Steve waited until the clouds gradually covered the sun. Steve shouted at the clouds, Hey black cloud, my daughter wants a husband who is the strongest in the world. Would you be willing to marry her? The cloud said, look at me. In a few minutes, there will be no trace of me. I disappear in the blink of an eye. This is the work of the wind. It is much stronger than me. If I cover the sun, the wind scatters me. Go and ask the wind. Steve waited a few minutes until the weather turned cold and the wind blew in the field. The cloud gradually disappeared and there was no trace of it left. Steve shouted at the wind as loud as he could. He asked the wind, would you be willing to marry my daughter? She wants a husband who's the strongest in the world. The wind said, although I am strong and can remove everything from my path, I become helpless when I reach the mountain. It wraps me around so much that I lose my strength and speed. So you better go to the mountain and ask it to marry your daughter. Steve set off and reached the mountain. He stood before it and looked up, shouting, Hey, mountain, my daughter desires a husband who is the strongest of all. You, who are the strongest, would you be willing to marry her? The mountain said, look down at your feet. What do you see? Steve said, only a hole. The mountain said, do you know who made this hole and lives in it? A mouse. He is much stronger than me. Call him and ask him. The mouse is resting in his hole right now. Steve thought it would be better to bring his daughter along. Steve's house was close to the mountain, so he returned home and told his daughter everything. Then he asked her, daughter, "Will you come with me to talk to the mouse?" Diana agreed and accompanied her father to the mountain. When they reached the mountain, Steve called out to the mouse. The mouse came out of its hole, and Steve stepped forward and asked him his question as well. The mouse said, "My home is very small. How can your daughter enter my home? I want a wife who is of my kind, so that I can live with her in this small hole." Diana said, "Father, now that I have found my beloved husband, please wish that I may become a mouse again, so that I can go with my husband to our small home. We can visit you every day. The mountain is close to your house." Steve didn't know what to do. He wanted his daughter to be happy, but he couldn't bear the thought of her becoming a mouse and leaving them alone again. After a moment of thought, he said, "Wouldn't it be better if I wished that the mouse turned into a man?" Diana said, "That's a much better idea. That way we won't miss each other." Steve wished, and the mouse quickly transformed into a man. The man said, "My name is Richard. I was cursed by a wizard many years ago, and I was unable to ask anyone to break the spell. But today you have broken it and set me free." They were all overjoyed and returned to Steve and Laura's house, where they told Laura the story. The next day, Diana and Richard were married, and they lived happily ever after in a house next door to Steve and Laura. If you are interested in this type of stories, you can watch these two videos as well.